everybody. This is the Jimmy Doane Show.
With Jimmy Doane, who is here today.
That is he, and I'm Counselor Curtis. We are coming to you live twice a week these days at 4 p.m. on Wednesdays and Sundays, as you can see on YouTube at the Jimmy Doane channel, D-O-A-N-E. Having a little technical difficulty with our videos still, but
we expect maybe Wednesday.
Yeah.
Maybe Wednesday we'll be back.
Yeah. So until then, sorry about that.
You just have to listen to us, which is good. You know, you can put us on your iPod or something, and when you're doing your jog.
It's easy.
Anywhere from 30 to 45 to 46 minutes worth or something, depending on how we do.
Yeah.
Actually, there's some interesting news today. We can browse through, and again, in no particular order. I thought one of the things that I thought was interesting was Kevin Spacey's movie opened in about a dozen theaters nationwide. Okay, I forget it's called the Billionaires Club or something like that.
Right.
Okay, the gross for all 8 theaters was like $450 or $125 or something like that. I mean,
yeah, I saw one report said $126.
Okay, right.
Whenever I see that, I think to myself, there must be. It's a matter of theater selection. The releases are decided by the producers, obviously, and the question is, do you release it in all the theaters at the same time? Do you trickle it out? How do you deal with this kind of stuff? And obviously if they decided to release it in 8 theaters, that's a nothing burger opening.
Well, they'd also put it on video on demand, apparently. Okay. I don't know how that scored, but the thing about it is, what gets me is this: when somebody broke out the math, and it was like, 1 or 2 tickets per theater.
Okay.
Is, talk about empty echo theater or whatever. But to me, I'm looking at it, of course, whether you like it or not, the guy's a good actor.
He's fantastic.
He's fantastic. I mean, when you see him in The Usual Suspects, for instance.
Man, the list goes on.
Yeah, and so this boycott business, to me, I'm sitting there thinking, I suppose, I guess maybe it's for the same reason that people are boycotting the NFL, for instance. Because the knee business, who cares?
Yeah.
I'm there to watch the game,
Well, it's a little more serious than that. If the allegations are true,
right,
then in some ways he's a sexual
predator.
Yeah,
but
that's different from taking a knee.
No, that's true. But again, for what it's worth, weren't the allegations from 20 years ago?
They were, and they weren't hideously hideous. He was aggressive with people, right, apparently, and they may have recurred up until recently, 5 or 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And
I don't know how many. Once the floodgates are opened, as you know, with Harvey Weinstein,
right,
Weinstein, whatever it was, then that everybody piles on, if they were or not. Now with Weinstein, I think that probably most of those people are credible. I mean, it makes sense because.
Yeah, well, and of course, there's a whole bunch of people with a whole bunch of worse accusations against Weinstein than against Spacey.
Right.
That's like the Cosby accusations almost. I mean, those are hideous.
Right.
And look, here's what it comes down to, and the easy way to keep all this in perspective is simple. We, as Americans, believe in innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's what you hold out. You think to yourself, look, we don't know the whole story from way over here, wherever we are.
Right.
So but you might as well believe him innocent until something goes down. If the guy gets convicted of something, like Cosby gets convicted, okay, go ahead, dogpile on the guy now. Right. It's the law has decided he messed up, he did the horrible things, and so go ahead. But for somebody like Spacey, I don't think there's been any charges filed.
No, I don't. He's not in jail. He hasn't been arrested.
He's suffered the wrath of the public retribution, the public damnation. He's lost jobs, series canceled, things like that. And so that aspect has been devastating. He's suffering the repercussions in that way. So if they're true, there's obviously already been some retribution from the universe, so to speak. Karmic.
The market is. But I thought this was kind of interesting in a way that we're talking about, like I said, $126 in 8 theaters or something, whatever it was. I mean, it was like one ticket per theater. Somebody went, and as I say, whether you like it or not, I'm not sure There's other ways to take retribution out on him, maybe, other than going to see a really good movie.
Well, I think it's either way in this case.
Yeah.
If you want to go ahead and condemn him before he's actually been charged and convicted, you have the right, obviously, to walk out of there with your dollars. Contrary, right. but nobody should condemn anybody for going to see the movies because there hasn't been any official action taken in any way. So I mean, from my perspective,
I wonder if they I haven't checked on this, but I wonder if a couple things. Speaking of movies, I wonder if Netflix and Amazon and those people have removed his movies.
The old stuff. I don't think so.
I don't think so. I don't think so either. But I
would still rent them. I just got finished binging House of Cards recently.
Oh yeah.
And it was fantastic. A little dark, but still, what an amazing actors at the top. There are 3 or 4 people at the top of the game in that series.
I haven't seen it yet.
It is artistry to watch. Spacey, the woman who plays his wife, is just amazing. And there are several other people. His first assistant, and you'll see if you watch it. But again,
I'll get around to it because
it's a little slow. It's a little dark.
Well, it's interesting you should say that because I've been binging. I found a new way to. I found out something on Netflix. Very often when you in the stuff you like, I mean, you go through all this stuff.
Spacey's this weird sexual predator in that show too. So, but go ahead. You go through all this stuff,
and some of the movies that are free are not there. And one I found, I binged on one time before, called Dexter.
Okay.
And it's about this guy who is a serial murderer, but he's a blood splash analysis.
Right.
His regular job.
Yeah.
But then he cuts up bad people.
Right.
And but I thought it was interesting that when I did a spyglass look for it, sure enough, it came up. Would you like to watch it? So it tells me that there are some movies every once in a while that are apparently not that you don't have to pay for.
That's not a movie. That's a TV.
I mean, a series. Yeah, series. That's what I'm saying. Whatever. Because there's a bunch of them that you have to pay $2.49 a shot for each episode, or $19 a season, or something.
Oh yeah,
like that.
You're poking around in the high rollers area.
Well, I'm saying, but I thought that
view.
it's interesting that Dexter is one that is it's a freebie, and yet it's not listed unless you go look for it. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Well, there's a huge cataclysmic sea change happening right now in the movie distribution arena.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Netflix is investing $6 to $8 billion this year in original programming development, because right now they get all their programming by licensing it from ABC, NBC, CBS, and the movie theaters, Lionsgate, Paramount, whoever.
Well, they have an awful lot of original content on there.
Well, they do, but still, the vast majority of the watching,
right? Yeah.
The watching is the licensed products. They're trying to shift it over, but right now, what we're seeing is all kinds of what normally would have been independent projects being created.
Amazon is doing it also.
Yep.
So it is interesting.
They're doing, and Apple has invested $1 billion in it.
Yeah.
Huge. Those are huge numbers relative to the movie.
Yeah, when you think about it, a blockbuster movie these days can cost $150 million to make.
Oh yeah.
And so if you're investing $1 billion, there's 6 blockbuster movies.
Yeah, or a bunch of TV series.
Right.
And a bunch of little lower end movies.
Right.
A bunch of $20 million movies.
Yeah.
And that's what they've done. And some of them are pretty cute. I watch previews. I love to watch previews. And
oh yeah.
I've seen a bunch of previews for a bunch of movies that obviously are not large studio made. So even Facebook's getting into their production.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. Because I did start to watch one. A new Matt Groening movie.
Yeah, Matt. He has a new animated series.
A new animated series. I started to watch it. A little boring, a little slow to get started. So I switched off and went over to Dexter and also Murder in Paradise or something like that, which is kind of a cute.
This is
one.
the.
I finished the Civil War, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it went up through. It didn't go through the Reconstruction, but it did. At the end, it told about all the players and when they died, what they did, blah blah blah, and I thought it was kind of interesting to see that kind of stuff. But I think there was like 8 segments to that, and it was instructive. I thought it was.
He's just a master. That guy's.
Yeah, he is. But, however, the consensus was that Lincoln was a genius. And
well, I mean, he was a pretty smart guy, I think.
well, yeah, but still, 650,000 deaths on something like this.
Well, look, it's a horrible stain on his record. Whenever
it's a
you
horrible stain on America. I mean, on the
Right.
United
Well,
States.
and the world, and whenever you preside over a war,
Well, a
you have
civil war,
lost
yeah.
in some way.
Yeah.
You have made the wrong, the mistake. Somewhere along the way, something was done. And maybe it happened, maybe it was all set up before he got there. Obviously, as soon as he was elected, they fired shots on the fort or whatever.
Yeah.
But it just seems like if he could have avoided the war, then he would really have been the greatest president, I mean, of all time.
Well, I think you kind of wonder, in a way. I've always wondered what would happen. People told to say poo-pooed this, but what would happen if you just let him go? You know, seceded from the Union.
Well, that would have avoided the war.
Right.
Yeah, you never know. Could have been a few months of negotiation. They could have come back and all over.
Well, again, the thing as I mentioned before, and they didn't cover this much, you know, about the people that had lost their slaves and blah blah blah. But one of the things that a person needs to know, or kind of getting off topic here, and I'll come back in a minute, but is that a slave system is nowhere near as competitive as a free market system. It's just no way. A free market system will always bury a slave system because slaves will work up to just the point where they don't get killed. And whereas a free market system, you have innovation, you work extra hard for the extra pay. So that's
Well, I mean, we kept it going for 100 years or more.
which
The slave labor situation.
you mean after the war?
No. I mean the whole time.
Oh well, slavery started in the 1650s or 1670s.
Well, I mean, it started
in this country.
Yeah, I was going to say started. It's been.
But anyway, my point is that every other slave people that had slaves peacefully got rid of it. The Brits, for instance, abolished it under no war or anything like that.
Right.
Of course, there's still slavery going on today. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, at some level, it makes sense economically because they do it for economic purposes. I mean, they sell slaves, and and people buy them. So,
Well,
they're making some kind of economic decision there.
I know, but my point is that if without the slavery, well, that's all speculation. I'm not going to monkey with that. I did want to mention one more thing before I get into my the things that I want to talk about today, and that is some wag brought up this thing. This is continuation of something we talked about last time. Was about the male cheerleaders that are in a couple of the NFL teams.
Saw a photograph. Yeah.
Yeah, male. Where do they shower after the game?
With
they all go
with the
together?
team.
You know,
With the team.
They have do they you know, when the ladies go to the ladies, when the cheerleaders shower, do the guys get to go in there too? You know, so what?
Good question.
Probably not. Okay. For starting off, this is another continuation actually, which I thought was interesting. Masterpiece Cake Shop owner sues Colorado for refusing to bake a trans woman's cake.
Yeah, I saw this. This is amazing to me.
I just was blown away. I mean, the new case centers on Autumn Scardina, or whoever she is, or he actually. If you listen to Shapiro, yeah, he's not gonna give anybody the pronoun that they wish for.
Yeah, you know, they can have a he or a she as far as I'm concerned.
Anyway, Kate from Phillips Masterpiece Cake Shop in June 2017 with a pink interior, blue exterior, to celebrate the anniversary of her or him coming out as a transgender woman. Now, the point is that they did this already. I mean, this has all been done.
Look,
you get to discriminate.
Well, look. Okay, as we set out before, when this Masterpiece Cake decision came down a few months ago, this was a very narrow decision by the Supreme Court.
Right.
Which means that it's subject to attack. And clearly, clearly this is an attack on Phillips, because think about it. There is no way that Mr. Phillips is not infamous in the LGBTQIA community.
Yeah.
He must send shivers down people's spines. They all have to know him. They got to have him on their targets, dartboards, whatever it is. Because, I mean, this is like a black guy going to a shop called the KK Cake Factory.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, if you're Jewish and you go to a neo-Nazi bakery, you want to inspect the ovens? You know?
Right.
No, I mean, this is a setup, and that's why he's suing them.
Right.
He's suing Colorado.
Right.
We'll see. To me, it just, as we've talked about in the past, the market would sort this whole thing out, because there's no way that normal LGBTQPA people are going to this cake shop to get their cakes made at this point.
I mean, there's just no chance. I mean,
No
you got to
chance.
figure there's 1,000 cake shops within
Right.
20 miles.
And you got to figure that the Yelp thing is like a glowing red surrounding circle around this guy's cake shop.
Right.
I mean, it's got to have crossbones and
right.
gun signals and all kinds of danger, do not go here, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So we'll see what comes out of it.
Well, it's interesting that the quote by the attorney, his attorney, is Colorado has renewed its war against him by embarking on another attempt to prosecute him. And I mean, it's pretty obvious. I mean, the fact is that this is bait. This is the bait thing. Why would you do this?
Well, look, what's happening, the reason that this is happening is because it's two parties. That is to say, you have the Colorado board, which is bound to act by the laws that they're acting under.
Stupid law.
Well, right. And what you have is somebody chumming the water there. This trans person has obviously been put up to this by somebody.
Right. Just
and
yeah.
To see, unless it happened before the ruling came out. So they said.
Well, no, it was June. It was just about a year ago.
Okay. Well, that was before the ruling came out.
Okay.
So I mean, it's possible that it's just a second attempt at the same type of thing, but well, yeah. I mean, it could have all been accidental, but it certainly, yeah, exactly. Look, it seems as if some group or another who wanted this lawsuit to go all the way up.
Well, it's interesting because Scardina filed a complaint with the state Civil Rights Commission claiming discrimination based on, quote, her, unquote, sex. Well, of course, it's a guy who's a trans.
Well, it doesn't matter.
No, but I mean, it's a guy. I mean, what on his what you know, you're a guy. What's your problem here? Because
well, the problem is that the baker discriminated, and the reason that he gave, or at least the reason that they are inferring,
right,
is that it's due to this guy's sexual orientation, which is contrary to Title VII, and you can't, under federal law, you can't do that.
Yeah, well,
so
it's interesting that
they're just taking advantage of the dumb federal law.
The commission has, based on refusing service based on sex, race, marital status, or sexual orientation.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, and the commission has ordered the two parties into mediation.
You know, that's the funny thing.
I mean, what?
Well, it's just part of their process,
I suppose.
But I think this is somebody trying to rub the guy's face in it, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, I just, you wonder what the mediation looks like.
Well, they're not going to get any mediation done. It's probably part of the court-ordered process.
Right, it is.
They go in there and they say, okay, so what'll happen is the two parties will enter the room. One party's attorney will turn to the other one and say, hey, do you guys want to drop this? No. Do y'all want to drop this? No. Okay, we mediated. See you next time. Sign here.
Yeah. And
then we'll go back in front of the judge. Judge, nothing happened. That kind of a thing. Or maybe it'll be a shouting match. That's the other possibility. You homo bigoted. You fag.
Well, interestingly enough, there's another article about civil rights.
Okay.
The Latino civil rights groups sue 32 Florida counties for not providing bilingual voting material.
Right.
I mean, I thought, of course, we're only, how close are we to the midterm elections? All we got is 2 months little over 2 months to go, but 75 days or something. And against Florida Secretary of State, 32 Florida counties for what they say is a violation of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, requiring bilingual voting materials and assistance to be provided to Puerto Ricans. Well, I didn't know that did the Voting Rights Act of 1965 say anything about providing?
It must have, or they wouldn't have cited it. It must be right in there, something about reasonable access to citizens of all territories, citizens of all protectorates, and the reasonable access must have been interpreted at some point to mean ballots in their language. But I wonder if it's based on a per capita evaluation or something. They were talking about the rise in numbers of Puerto Ricans in Florida,
right,
because of obviously the hurricane disaster there.
Right.
So there's been another huge wave influx.
And of course, Puerto Ricans have always been allowed to. Couldn't they vote in the presidential election or not?
That's a good question. I think they can. Yeah, I think they can.
I forget.
Yeah.
Anyway, but the bottom line is that, of course, the thing about it's interesting that this is only coming up now. I mean, if that's the case, you look at some jurisdictions, like in L.A., for instance, where there's 100 different languages spoken, and
in L.A.
Oh yeah, somebody was telling me there's over 100 spoken in the L.A. school system.
Well, I mean, official languages. I mean, look, you can cover 95% of the people with like 3 languages. You get English and then Spanish,
Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean,
those are
Japanese,
all less than 1% of the population.
And
so I'm saying you've already got 99% covered. So the question is, what's a reasonable accommodation? I think what's happening here is the Hispanic Association, it sounds like they're trying to get greater access for all kinds of people, piggybacking on the requirement that Puerto Ricans are given access.
Well,
It sounds like that what they're saying is, and this may be true, there's probably a huge number of Spanish-speaking only people in South Florida who regularly just don't go to the polls because there aren't ballots in Spanish. And this is probably an effort to effect a wave of change and get a whole bunch of more ballots sent down there that are compliant or in their language, and they're just using the Puerto Rico thing. 2 things I'll say about it. As you know, I am for amnesty and practically open borders. But from my perspective, we should only have one official language.
Yeah.
And if it says in the 1965 Voting Rights Act anything about providing ballots in other languages, I would say that should be changed, because you have to have at least a common way to communicate. There's no way to accommodate all those other language people. It just gets confusing once you start using more than one language. All the different interpretations. We already have problems with when there's like summaries of ballot actions.
Oh yeah, that's really unbelievable.
So imagine having to have an official Spanish interpreter at every step of the game, all the way down the chain, to make sure that all of those things are properly done. Otherwise,
because when you think about it, like some of the ballot initiatives, here in Florida, they're limited to 75 words on the ballot. The initiative might be 1,000 words.
Right. And so now are you going to have 75 Spanish words? And if so, then are you going to have official interpreters, official spokespeople for the various initiatives? And because all those people are subject to lawsuit if there's some confusion in the ballots, and
right.
then you could have a situation where initiatives don't get passed because there's this ambiguity in the Spanish balloting,
or they get passed because of some ambiguity.
Right. And so to me, it's a whole wave of ambiguity. And
well, it's one of the things that I always like to see. I've got some pictures, I think, on my Facebook or someplace or another in my and that is a poster out in somebody's yard that just says "Vote No on number 1."
Right.
That's all it says. Nothing. Have no idea. I mean, you're supposed to vote no based on that?
No, you're supposed to go look up what 1 is or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Well, and here's the one thing I'm going to say about Puerto Rico, since we brought it up, and that is end the Jones Act.
Yes.
For the love of God,
Yeah.
you know, you want to help Puerto Rico in any way. Allow them to be an extension port for the United
Well, not
States.
only that, the Jones Act is horrible for Hawaii.
It is. It's horrible for Hawaii.
And Puerto Rico both. I mean, it's just. I mean, what it does is, and of course, this is one of those things that nothing is so permanent as a temporary government program.
Was it supposed to be temporary?
Well, I'm sure. You know,
I'm sure.
You try and get it unpassed. Okay, here's the deal.
Uh-huh.
You will see howls
Yeah.
from the merchant marine people or somebody.
Yeah, I wonder who Mr. Jones is.
Yeah, right.
All right, what else we got?
Okay, the next thing is another continuation that Omarosa Newman may have an archive of up to 200 secretly recorded audio files from her time working in the White House.
Oh yeah, me too.
Yeah, well, the former aide to President Donald Trump has released several such recordings over the past week. Now, I don't know if this is real news or not. I forget where I got this from. It might be from CNN, which reportedly left officials in the administration, quote, rattled, according to the New York Times. Well, that tells you something right off the bat.
Yeah.
So anyway, the latest tape, which she said included a discussion in which the president's daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, offered a $15,000 a month job with the 2020 Trump re-election campaign. The clip was played on MSNBC, and she later suggested that the offer came after she was fired in December, and it was an effort to buy her silence. So anyway, and then anyway, I don't know if apparently what the clip that they played is not any like real incriminating thing. It's just
they haven't played anything really incriminating
No.
yet. Here's my supposition: she's fired all her guns already.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay.
I don't think she's got anything left, and we'll see if she's smart. What she will have done is saved the big guns for October.
I see.
And then she could become a star for the Democrats in October by busting out the great tape of him yelling out the N-word and smacking some woman on the behind or something like this.
Mm-hmm.
But barring that, they are getting ready to make Trump look really good because, as I said before, they keep saying they've got all these recordings of him, and everybody says the worst things about Trump are that he lies and he's a racist and a misogynist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Well, he's married. Okay? So I don't know how much of a misogynist you think relative to Clinton or John F. Kennedy or
Right.
what the list goes on. Racist, I don't know. If you want to compare him to, I don't know, Franklin Roosevelt, who imprisoned all the Japanese, or Woodrow Wilson, who was a known racist in office,
Right.
Versus here's a guy who they're saying 50 years ago may have excluded some people from renting community through his parents or something. I don't know. And so it just they're about to start making it look really good from my perspective.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because if you go back, you can't really find a hint of racism. I mean, he hired the girl anyway, gave her a shot.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
how racist?
How racist
is
is that? You could have just not given her the job in the first place.
Yeah.
And
if you had a tape of him saying, if she had a tape of him saying, "I'm not hiring that dog."
Yeah, right. Exactly. No, but I mean, seriously, she got hired.
Yeah.
That is, I mean, on its face, it's so silly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
now
she's a black woman, and
well, if
he put her in the White House for $15,000 a month.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. It's also interesting. I've always said, and she's one of them, that at what point do you become a black person? I mean, I've seen some people that are like really almost white, and they consider themselves black.
Well,
and then of course there was the white girl who was the NAACP head out west someplace.
Yeah. Well, look, clearly, if you have relatives or if you live that lifestyle, like you think about somebody like Obama, he looks black, so he probably had the classic black American experience, with the exception that he grew up in Hawaii.
I was going to say.
And Hawaii is not exactly the same type of racial
not at all.
makeup. And I'm sure, and I know because I live there, that black people aren't treated the same way that black people on the mainland are treated.
Right.
And neither are white people. white people are a super minority out there,
Oh yeah.
and so there's a lot of discrimination against us.
Yeah.
But
Well, that's what happens. Okay, now we're going to have to give you a Venezuela update.
okay,
Faced with nearly incomprehensible inflation, 32,700% as of Wednesday, Venezuelan officials. Now, by the time I'm reading this, it's probably higher than that.
right.
You know, that's 3 days ago or something.
Yeah, didn't we talk about it was going to be 1,000,000% by the end of the year?
Yeah, they changed so what they did is they changed the color of the banknotes and increased their denomination.
Mm-hmm.
And they've lopped. Do we say they're lopping off 5 zeros?
Yeah.
Okay, and they of course the beauty is it brings even with that it brings the price of a cup of coffee to an eye-watering 2 million bolivars. And so and this one this one cafe where they serve coffee, and this lady there says, the owner says, we have been forced to raise prices in my cafe at least 40 times this year. I mean, that's in what, 8 months?
Mm-hmm.
Raise prices 40. Can you? I mean, what is that? About every 3 days or something? You jack up the price, or however that works. It's just to me, I'm laughing because if you don't know history, you're destined to relive it. I mean, this is Weimar Republic stuff.
Yeah, well, apparently the education for a bus driver in Venezuela didn't include Weimar Germany or...
Right. Well, not only that, it's interesting because both Ecuador and Brazil have set up, they're getting too many people in, so they're basically...
There was a big fight on a Colombian border town this
Right.
last week.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, the newly minted currency will be known as the sovereign bolivar,
Mm-hmm.
and will be rolled out tomorrow, Monday, because today is, by the way, I meant to mention this, today is the 19th of August, 2018, just so you'll know. So anyway, in addition, the president has ordered measures that his United Socialist Party has been loath to consider in the past. An increase in gas prices for some drivers, and a modest ease in the currency controls that have made dollars inaccessible for most Venezuelans for years. And I think that this is interesting that these are things that the market would fix in no time if you allowed the gas prices to well, let me put it this way. In this country, when we had the first Arab shock in 1973, lines, because they tried to control the price of gas, and they limited it, and instantaneously, within an hour after they lifted the price controls, the lines disappeared because the gas was available at a higher price, of course, but I mean it weeded out. And one of the things that was happening was especially down in St. Petersburg, all the old folks, as soon as they would use up 2 gallons of gasoline, they'd go top off. And it was just really amazing. So,
well, we've seen price controls and wage controls are two of the drastic measures that dictators and authoritarians take whenever they feel bumps in the economy due to their own...
But they have never worked. I mean, never in the history of mankind.
Well, it doesn't matter. They're one of those temporary fix type Band-Aid things that somebody can say, well, at least we're doing something, and it's...
Yeah, what we're doing is, here we got this guy here, and we're slicing him up with a knife. Well, at least we're doing something.
That's right, that's right.
So and what you're doing is, and it's just interesting because, of course, they've done a lot of the stuff in our Congress, and those people are obviously illiterate or politics or something like that because, the Federal Reserve and the inflation that we have, and they're bragging about it.
Well, look, everybody is hoping that there will be some gigantic fix that'll come out of the magic sky.
There'll be a fix.
In the meantime, yeah. Well, they're hoping it'll be a good thing. We invent anti-gravity or something like that, and then all of a sudden there's this huge economic engine, or they just die in the meantime. It's a short-term strategy. Keynesianism always is.
Yeah, it is, because one of the most famous things he ever said was, of course, he called gold a barbarous relic, which at the time maybe, but no. But the other thing is, his famous thing was, in the long run, we're all dead.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the fact is, we're in the long run.
Well, and the fact is, in the long run, no, we're not, because most of us have kids, and so we're not dead.
No. But I'm saying I'm living. In other words, when he said in the long run, in 1945 or
right.
whatever.
Now we're in the long run.
Now we're in the long run.
Well,
and
right.
so we're
and it'll always be.
Always be something. That's right. So one more. Let me see. There's one more.
Well, speaking of Keynesianism, we should mention Elizabeth Warren's comments.
Oh God, that's right. I meant to take those. Yeah, she wants to nationalize everything, or what is it?
She is apparently proposing making a drastic new proposal.
Okay. To
clean up, to shore up capitalism. The socialists have an idea that there's a problem with capitalism. They'll always tell you that unreined capitalism, unfettered capitalism will bring chaos and destruction and poverty and all kinds of horrendous
and it
stuff.
Will make the rich richer and the poor poorer.
Right. So these are all myths we could go into one at a time, but suffice to say that she wants to change the fundamental relationship between employers and employees in every company that has a market cap over $1 billion.
Really? Now, what's magic about the $1 billion?
Well, that is an enlightening question, because if you think about it, it's clearly an arbitrary monetary standard, which doesn't bear at all on the morality of the company.
Right.
And so she's condemning everyone in one fell swoop, all of the successful companies throughout time. She's saying, do not care for their workers enough.
Well, not only that, she says she says that she wants to enlarge the people that the company cares about to the stakeholders, which is like everybody.
Well, what she named 3 groups specifically that she wants to change the relationship with.
Okay, and that is
the workers, the customers, and the communities. That is the towns and cities that they're centered in.
Communities, right?
Okay, so she wants to change the fundamental relationship between companies and those 3 groups. She doesn't understand the fundamental relationships between the companies and those 3 groups.
No, she's not that smart. Nobody is.
Well, look, they're not that difficult, but you do have to know, for example, you can't change the fundamental relationship between an employer and an employee. Okay, I've heard socialists say this several times. Why don't we force the employers to watch out for the employees? It's kind of an extrapolation on like workplace safety or something.
Okay.
And they say, why don't we make, and this is her idea, she wants to make the employers fiduciaries of the employees.
Okay.
She wants to make them responsible to the employees for their monetary benefit. Now, the reason you cannot do that is because it fundamentally destroys the business. What you're saying is, look, an employee is simply one of the supplies that the company uses.
Right.
It buys employees.
Right. Just like it buys any raw material.
Exactly. And it has to bargain to get those supplies at the cheapest price.
Right.
If you try to say that the company has to pay one of its suppliers labor, anything other than the cheapest price, it'll go out of business the first day.
Yeah.
Because it's the same thing as if you were to tell a shipbuilder, oh, you have to pay your steel makers the most amount possible. No, you can't. They have to get the steel the cheapest possible. And for every labor, you have to buy the labor as cheap as possible. You cannot fundamentally destroy that relationship. The only one who can watch out for the workers' wages is the worker themselves, or a group that they voluntarily join, like a union.
Right.
And group, that's an easy way to get bargaining power. If you think that workers don't have bargaining power, you simply align yourself with other people with similar certification levels, and you say, we're bargaining together. If you want someone with us, with our skill level, you have to pay us. Mm-hmm. And so, but you can't fundamentally change that relationship. The next relationship she wants to change is between a business and a customer. That relationship, again, is very well defined. The business has to do everything in its power to attract the customer.
To satisfy the customer.
To satisfy, to attract, and to make them come back. So you already have all of the impetus possible for the company to get the customer there. If you try to say they have to do more than everything possible, like pay them or something, It doesn't even make sense.
No.
It just.
Well, what's interesting is that the real world belies what she is saying, because anybody that's had almost anybody. Now there are horror stories, okay, but almost anybody that's had an interaction with, say, returning something, or complaining about the food or whatever it is. I mean, they bend over backwards to make sure you're happy. I mean, they will go out of their way, even if it's unfair.
Right.
They will. I mean, I can't tell you how many times.
You can walk into a Burger King and say, I just went through the drive-thru and they left out my Big Mac. I'd like one, please. And they will give it to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, and I have had personal experiences, seriously, with Wendy's and Burger King and McDonald's on this regard. I've told this story before, but I remember that a bunch of us had been out fishing or something, and we went through a new drive-in through Wendy's, and we ordered up food for everybody. There's 4 of us in the car, and we ordered up food for everybody. And got home with our bags of food and found out they'd left out the milkshakes. So we called them up and said, hey, we went through your drive-through and you left out the milkshakes and we're not happy. Give me your address. We said, look, this is a brand new subdivision. You're never going to find us. We have an address, but good luck. Boy, I tell you, it wasn't 8 minutes later they showed up with the biggest, most huge milkshakes you can ever at our door, delivery, no charge. I mean, it was just, you sit there and, and that's one of the things that there's been a study recently that says that the repeat customers are the ones that had been satisfied because they complained.
Oh well, sure. I would imagine. I mean that really, I've heard that as a sales technique as well.
Right.
Anger your customer and then satisfy them quickly.
Well, I tell you, it happened to me another time. I mean, I remember coming through Tallahassee one time with my mother, and I got off to go get a McDonald's, and the directions to where this McDonald's was were hazy. So I wrote him a letter and I said, you need to change your instructions coming off of I-10 if you're, blah, blah, blah. I wrote this. Well, boy, I'll tell you, by return mail, coupons for hamburgers, coupons for drinks, please come by and see us again. I mean, the guy put $10, $15 in the envelope for me.
Yeah.
So needless to say, we went by.
There's no need to alter that relationship, Miss Warren. Finally,
and the community.
Right. Finally, she says, the community. Look, corporations do as much community activism as they possibly can. That is, if they're big corporations, they do corporate advertising to make themselves look good. They sponsor things like youth soccer leagues and races and all kinds of stuff. Give back all over the place. So they're already doing literally as the most that they can possibly do for their return on their investment. And so you can't change that relationship either. She's just, her intentions are fine. It's just horrifying potential execution, and from my perspective. She's focused in totally the wrong direction. There's half a dozen things that government actually does that distorts the actual free market.
Right.
That if they were to just undo and get out of the way, things would shift back. For example, remove the patents and copyrights that the protection that Google and Facebook and those companies have.
Right.
Those are, you could just allow competitors into the market by not protecting competitors.
Well, and the good ones have to provide the best service. What's interesting, speaking of that, somebody was saying that the market will fix Facebook, and somebody was saying that of the people under 30 are abandoning Facebook in droves.
Yeah. I don't know that it'll last more than a generation.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. That's my point. The thing about this community business, of course, there's couple things that, as you mentioned, you can't go down the street and see somebody not wearing a t-shirt that all over the back has like the race, and it was sponsored by the local banks and this, that, and the other, and so forth. We have our wild game feast here in Alachua County that, I mean, probably $30,000 or more comes from sponsors. And
you go to the local theater, you flip through the program, it's business after business sponsored there and there. And there's some advertising as well, but
well, let me just tell you, but I mean, they have to pony up with the money to do that. I mean, they have to actually give money to the charity here, our charity. But the other thing that I want to recommend to people, and I don't know if you can still find it, years ago I watched a movie with Danny DeVito and was it Gregory Peck? it's one of the famous guys, but called Other People's Money. Now, if you want to, you can fast forward to the end of this movie. I mean, it's really a good movie, anything with Danny DeVito. But there are two speeches. What's happening is this company that's been in business in this community for 100 years or whatever, and they're getting ready, and Danny DeVito is called Larry the Liquidator, and he's bought up a whole lot of shares, and he wants to have seats on the board. So they have the meeting of all the shareholders, and of course most of them are in the town, and Gary, whoever the guy is, and I keep forgetting which, I get him mixed up. He was the owner of the major shareholder and the owner of the company, and he gives this speech about how we've been good for the community, and this is our company for this, that, and the other thing, and so forth. And we're going to muddle through this. We're going to make it. Don't worry. Don't give this guy all. He's just after the money and so forth. And that's an interesting speech. Then Danny DeVito gets up there, and if you ever get a speech, it's about 3.5 minutes. I probably ought to see if I can put it on my website.
We'll put a link to it.
Put a link to it, yeah. And he gives a speech about, what does he say? One of the seminal lines in there is, I'm not your friend, I'm your only friend. I'm the one who wants to pay you money. You're already bankrupt, but you just don't know it yet. And he goes through this whole thing, and he makes this impassioned speech, and not to give it away, but it works. And but that speech, 3.5 minutes, to me is one of the greatest free market speeches you'll ever hear. And I if you can find a copy,
we'll put a link to it. I'll find it.
Okay. Well, I've got it on my thing. I can record it. I mean, I can do it if it doesn't get booted off because of copyright. All right. Finally, this is my last thing.
Okay.
I think. No. Okay. Yeah. I think that it's interesting. You've heard the story about service animals and comfort animals.
Yes.
Come September 17th, this is amazing, Phoenix, Arizona. Come September 17th, people will be able to carry miniature horses on board Southwest flights as trained service animals.
Yes, emotional support animals.
Emotional support. Now they have to get an official ticket, from a psychiatrist and all this other stuff.
Well, no, it says they have to provide convincing oral testimony.
Okay. But I mean, here I'm asking myself, this is probably one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard.
No, it's important. I got an emotional support animal recently, an emotional support python, and which was fine until it ate somebody else's emotional support animal.
Yeah, but I mean, where are you going to put even a miniature pony? Where are you going to put it? It's going to sit in a seat?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Well, I mean, my point is, and let me tell you something
If you
else.
could have like a Great Dane.
Yeah, well, that's true. But what gets me about service type animals is that, here we're talking about a cute pony, but they always say don't pet them.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh no, don't pet service animal. Oh yeah.
Oh right. Yeah.
And so, but I mean, who doesn't want to pet the pony? I mean, you're sitting there next to this pony.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, look, it's
for 4 hours. You're sitting next to this pony, and you're not allowed to touch it. No.
Don't look at it.
No,
don't look at the pony.
Don't even look at it. Right. I'm sitting there thinking,
that's my pony.
So they're formally.
It's like the ultimate little.
Another PSAs, of course, normally are public service announcements, but in this case, they're psychiatric support animals as trained service animals, and after accepting them informally in the past. And they also limit each passenger to one emotional support animal. I mean, I think that one lady tried to take her peacock on there. I think.
Oh yeah.
Something that I'm not sure they let her on, but I mean everything. Of course, a lot of this, as you know, has been abused.
You bring like a herd of meerkat or something.
Well, no, but it's in restaurants and stuff like that. They've talked about you brought your dog in and. No pets allowed.
Well, yeah. Well, one of our former roommates, who is deeply involved with the service animal certification program, tells me that there's all sorts of fakes, basically.
Right.
And there's a couple of different levels I'm familiar with in the law in terms of differences in support animals, and there are some which are emotional support animals, and then there are others which are service animals.
Right.
and those are two different levels.
What about the ones that detect a seizure?
Yeah, that's an actual service animal.
Okay.
That's like a specialized,
Okay, yeah, I know.
well-trained, that thing is a freaking doctor
Yeah.
in a dog.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, I mean, those are amazing. And yeah, you can't touch them. Now, emotional support animals, like in California, can be practically anything.
Really? Yeah, I suppose.
It can be like, this is my gerbil.
Gerbil? Yeah.
Yeah, my guinea pig, whatever it is. So, and all you have to do again is provide convincing verbal certifications, basically.
Well, of course, if it's a hamster, you'd only have to show it. You know.
Well, I mean, you have to. When I say convincing, that's not the. I'm trying to think of the legal term for it. I think it says it in the article, and there's a legal term that you have to provide. It's like. It's synonym with convincing and starts with a C.
Okay.
But basically, it means
Convincing.
right.
Okay. All right. Well, that's pretty much what I have.
Okay. Well, I got a couple little other things real quick. I noticed that Manafort trial is over now.
Is it in the jury's hands?
Yes.
Okay. When's the ruling expected? Tomorrow?
It could be any day, anytime.
Okay.
Any minute. What's interesting is a couple of things. Number one, the defense offered no defense.
Right.
Which is amazing.
Right.
Because you almost always have to offer, as I've said many times, a plausible hypothesis consistent with innocence if you're expecting to be found innocent.
Okay.
You can't just poke holes in the prosecution's witness, which is what they tried to do. They tried to attack Gates. The reason that doesn't work is because the prosecution didn't hide the fact that Gates was a bad guy, basically.
Right.
They were going to charge him with a crime also.
Yeah.
So he has immunity now, which is he got a deal from them anyway, or maybe not immunity, but a deal. So anyway, he may go down. It looks to me like he's going for the pardon defense. So we'll see.
It's interesting you should say that because I was listening to Scott Adams of Dilbert. He has his Periscope that he does once or twice a day.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that he believes that the media believe that the verdict is going to be innocent. And here's the reason. Here's his reason for it. He says that the media are going out and finding the names and addresses of all the jurors. And he says, now why would they do that?
Right.
If it's going to come back all guilty.
Right.
They're going to want to interview the ones that, and as Scott Adams said, as far as he's concerned, if he learned, if he was on a jury, he said he'd been on a jury twice, he said if he learned that they were out looking for names and addresses and so forth, if he were on the jury, he automatically, no matter what it said, would say innocent. He said he does not want to sit there and say guilty, and everybody knows his address and everything. So.
Right. Well, interesting. I mean, it could go either way in terms of the retribution from the community. They could hold him accountable.
But it's Manafort. I mean, what do you mean the community? What community?
Well, the Antifa could decide that the jury has inappropriately protected Donald Trump by acquitting his former campaign manager inappropriately and could firebomb his house. I mean, that's just a speculative backlash.
Yeah,
but
that's speculative because
sure,
because you know that of course is patently illegal.
Right. But that's the kind of thing that they're doing.
Thank you, Maxine Waters.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it is very interesting to me that the jury has not convicted him already. It's been a couple of days since they have gone out, and that in and of itself, they asked a question about reasonable doubt.
Right.
That's a deep question. If somebody is questioning the meaning of reasonable doubt, that means somebody's on the fence. And
normally you would think, though, that the reasonable doubt part would be brought up by the defense.
Right, well, it is.
The defense didn't put up any defense.
Well, but I'm sure they mentioned reasonable doubt in their closing argument.
Oh, okay.
They still made a closing argument.
Okay, right.
What they didn't do was offer any witnesses,
right,
or any testimony or evidence to counteract what the prosecution had put on.
Right.
Which is almost, in some ways, it's just, woof, man, that's risky.
Okay, next.
But they obviously had nothing. All right, so 300 newspapers came out against the president.
Yes, right. I mean, you talk about a conspiracy.
Well, that's what the 300 newspapers said, was that they are not colluding against the president.
Right. Okay, now here's the deal. They all come out on the same day.
Right.
300 newspapers.
That say we're independent.
We're independent, and we don't like Trump, and of course
It's not that we don't like Trump. That's where the news falls.
Yeah, unbelievable. I mean, you sit there and you think these guys. It is amazing. The people that the never Trump people are they're haters from hell.
Yeah.
They still can't accept the fact that he's elected, and they want to get him out any way they can.
Yeah. Well, what's crazy is this blindness, forest for the trees blindness here.
Yeah.
From their perspective, they think they're trumpeting their own case by coming out and saying this, when in reality they're playing his game.
Yeah.
I mean, they're literally reacting, every one of them, to his claim of fake news. They're putting themselves on the list as being one of the ones that he said.
Right.
He just tweets out fake news, and they say, well, we're on that list. Let me go ahead and oppose the it's like,
yeah.
Geez, what kind of just numbskullish behavior, craziness. Let's see. One more thing, just let's see. Should we get into that? What time is it? Maybe not.
We're still here. Don't panic. Don't turn it off yet.
All right. Well, I'll say one more thing real quick. A woman this week got 15 years in prison for a DUI manslaughter. The real reason she got 15 years was because she panicked after she hit the guy, and she drove off more than a mile with the guy like sticking out of her windshield, basically.
Okay.
So the reason that is the reason she got the 15 years is because when that's splashed all over the newspapers, it makes it look like this woman is some heinous person, that she doesn't even care that there's somebody hanging out of her windshield, when in all likelihood she was just probably losing her mind.
Right.
She's probably freaked out beyond all comprehension, had no idea what to do.
Right.
Probably didn't even remember driving that mile. And it doesn't matter. They're going to give her 15 years because, once again, they've transferred her intent to drink and her intent to drive into, with a little magic, little shiftiness over here,
Legerdemain.
little shiftiness over there, into intent to murder someone, which for 500 years it was required that you actually tried to kill somebody.
Right.
But here in the land of the free, she gets 15 years. So watch out.
Yeah.
Get a self-driving car.
Yep.
All right, that's all we got today.
Yeah. Good. Right on time.
Hopefully, we'll be back with video next week.
Let's see. That's Wednesday.
Yes.
4 o'clock. And we expect that we'll have video that time.
Yes. That's the word, Thunderbird. So thank you very much for tuning in. Maybe we'll provide an email or something next time. I guess you can always leave comments down below, and we'll see them. So thanks a lot. See you next time.
Well, you'll see us, we hope. We expect you'll see us next time at any rate.